The datapad made a soft beeping sound as Kieran Vell picked it up from his desk. Another assignment. Probably another boring survey of some primitive world where nothing interesting ever happened. He had been doing these monitoring jobs for the Syndicate Council for almost 10 cycles now, and they all felt the same. Watch the locals, count their weapons, measure their technology, write a report that nobody really read. But this assignment was different. The target species was called humans, and they lived on a small blue planet in a remote corner of the galaxy. According to the files, they had only recently discovered space travel and were setting up research stations around nearby stars. The Syndicate wanted to know if they posed any threat to galactic peace. Kieran almost laughed as he read through the briefing materials. These humans had barely figured out how to leave their home planet, and the Council was worried they might be dangerous. Their technology looked crude and inefficient. Their weapons were simple projectile devices that threw metal pellets. They still used chemical fuel to power their spacecraft. It was like watching children play with toys. The assignment details were simple enough. Kieran would pose as a cultural exchange observer and spend several months at one of their research stations. He would document their daily activities, assess their military capabilities, and determine whether they might become a problem for the Syndicate in the future. Based on what he had read, Kieran expected to recommend that the humans be left alone to play with their primitive gadgets until they either grew up or destroyed themselves. His supervisor, Administrator Yoth, called him into the briefing room to discuss the mission. The older alien gestured at a holographic display showing the human research station orbiting a red dwarf star called Proxima 7. This should be straightforward. Vell. The humans appear to be conducting some kind of scientific research at this location. We need to know what they are doing and whether it could affect Syndicate interests in that sector. The assignment should take no more than 3 months. Kieran studied the display. The human station looked like a collection of metal cylinders connected by tubes and covered in strange antenna arrays. It was much smaller than even a basic Syndicate research facility, and the construction looked rough and improvised. What do we know about their capabilities, Administrator? Yoth pulled up another screen showing various human technologies. Very limited. Their fastest ships can barely reach 1/10 light speed. Their computers are based on primitive silicon circuits instead of proper bioneural networks. They seem to have no understanding of quantum field manipulation or dimensional folding. Frankly, I'm not sure why the Council considers them worth monitoring at all. Then why are we watching them? Because they are expanding rapidly despite their limitations. In just 50 of their years, they have established colonies on several worlds and built dozens of research stations. The Council wants to understand how such a primitive species can expand so quickly. There may be something we are missing. Kieran doubted that. From what he could see, the humans were just throwing resources at problems without any real planning or efficiency. They probably built so many stations because half of them failed and had to be replaced. Still, an assignment was an assignment. The journey to the human research station took 2 weeks aboard a Syndicate stealth ship. Kieran spent most of the time studying human languages and cultural practices. They seemed to have hundreds of different languages and thousands of different customs, which struck him as incredibly inefficient. The Syndicate had solved the communication problem thousands of years ago, with universal translation implants and standardized cultural protocols. When they reached the Proxima 7 system, the Syndicate ship dropped Kieran off at the human station and departed. He had been given a cover identity as an observer from the Galactic Cultural Exchange Institute, which the humans apparently found believable. They had even sent him a welcoming message saying they were excited to meet their first alien visitor. The airlock cycled, and Kieran got his first look at the humans in person. They were smaller than he had expected, with soft-looking skin and no visible natural weapons like claws or armor plates. The one who greeted him introduced himself as Alex, the station's engineering coordinator. He had short brown hair and wore a simple blue uniform that looked comfortable rather than formal. "Welcome aboard, Kieran. We have been looking forward to this for months. It is not every day we get to meet someone from another world. How was your trip?" The human's enthusiasm seemed genuine, which surprised Kieran. Most species were either fearful or suspicious when meeting aliens for the first time. These humans acted like they were greeting an old friend. Alex gave him a tour of the station, chattering constantly about their research projects and daily operations. The facility was even more primitive up close than it had appeared in the briefing materials. The corridors were narrow and cramped, with exposed pipes and cables running along the walls. Everything looked like it had been assembled quickly from whatever materials were available. "I know it does not look like much," Alex said, noticing Kieran's expression, "but it gets the job done. We built this place in 6 months with a crew of 20 people. Not bad for government work, right?" They passed through what Alex called the common area, where several humans were eating and talking. They looked up as Kieran entered, and their faces showed curiosity rather than fear. One of them, a woman named Nina who worked as the station medic, walked over to introduce herself. "So you are our alien visitor. This is incredible. I have about 1,000 questions, but I suppose you're probably tired from your journey. Are you hungry? Do you eat the same kind of food we do?" Kieran explained that his dietary needs were similar to theirs, and within minutes he found himself sitting at a table surrounded by humans, asking him questions about his homeworld, his species, and life in the galaxy. Their curiosity was overwhelming but not unpleasant. They seemed genuinely interested in learning rather than trying to extract useful information. The next few days fell into a routine. Kieran observed the humans as they went about their daily work, taking notes on everything he saw. Their research focused on studying the strange energy patterns being emitted by Proxima 7, which they believed might lead to new discoveries in quantum physics. Their method struck him as chaotic and unscientific, but they seemed to be making progress despite their lack of proper procedures. What puzzled Kieran most was their attitude toward problems. When equipment broke down or experiments failed, they did not follow proper protocols or request assistance from higher authorities. Instead, they improvised solutions using whatever materials they had on hand. It was inefficient and often dangerous, but somehow it worked. He began composing his first report to the Syndicate Council, documenting what he had observed so far. The humans were exactly as primitive as expected, but they were also oddly resourceful. It might take longer than 3 months to understand how such a disorganized species could accomplish anything at all. 17 days into his assignment, Kieran discovered that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. It started with a broken water recycling system that should have been a disaster but somehow turned into a demonstration of capabilities that defied his understanding of their supposed primitiveness. The malfunction began during what the humans called third shift, when most of the crew was sleeping. Kieran was in his assigned quarters reviewing his daily notes when emergency lights started flashing throughout the station. A voice over the communication system announced that the primary water recycling unit had suffered a cascade failure, and all available personnel were needed in Engineering Section C immediately. Kieran followed the sounds of running footsteps through the corridors, expecting to find panic and confusion. Instead, he found Alex already kneeling beside an open control panel, while Nina ran diagnostic scans with a handheld device. Roy, the station's pilot, was hauling spare parts from a storage locker, and Dr. Beth, their xenobiologist, was rapidly calculating flow rates on a portable computer. "What is the situation?" Kieran asked Alex, who was now elbow-deep in a tangle of circuits and pipes. "Microfracture in the main processing unit caused a pressure spike that blew out 3 backup systems," Alex replied without looking up. "We have about 18 hours of stored water before things get serious. The good news is that all the essential components survived. The bad news is that everything is connected wrong now. This should have been impossible to fix without replacement parts and a proper repair facility. Syndicate protocol would have been to evacuate the station and wait for a maintenance crew to arrive with the correct equipment, but the humans did not seem interested in following any logical protocols." Nina finished her scan and showed the results to Alex. "The main filtration matrix is intact, but the control pathways are completely scrambled. It is like trying to untangle 50 different puzzles at the same time. Good thing we have Roy," Alex said, grinning at the pilot. "Remember that cargo hauler we fixed on Titan Station? Same principle, different scale." Roy nodded and started sorting through the spare parts. "I see what you mean. We can bypass the damaged control circuits using manual valves and run everything through the backup processors. It will not be pretty, but it should work." Kieran watched in amazement as the 4 humans worked together without any formal coordination or chain of command. They did not follow procedures or consult technical manuals. Instead, they seemed to instinctively understand what needed to be done and how to do it. Alex would start working on something, and Nina would anticipate what tools he needed. Roy would begin modifying a component before anyone asked him to. Dr. Beth would run calculations and adjustments that somehow perfectly matched what the others were building. "How do you know this will work?" Kieran asked. "Have you tested these modifications before?" "Not exactly," Alex admitted, "but the principles are sound. Water is water, pressure is pressure, and filtration is filtration. The specifics might be different, but the physics stays the same. Sometimes you just have to trust that the universe makes sense." This was completely contrary to everything Kieran had learned about proper engineering practices. Syndicate technology relied on precise specifications and tested procedures. Every component had to meet exact standards, and every repair had to follow approved methods. The idea of improvising critical life support systems based on general principles was madness, but somehow it worked. Within 6 hours, the humans had completely rebuilt the water recycling system using spare parts, improvised connections, and modifications that should not have been possible. The repaired system actually ran more efficiently than the original design, processing water faster and using less power. "How?" Kieran asked Dr. Beth as they watched the newly repaired system running smoothly. "This should not be possible with your level of technology." Dr. Beth smiled and gestured at the improvised machinery. "I think you might be looking at this backwards, Kieran. Our technology is not advanced because we have amazing materials or perfect manufacturing. It is advanced because we designed it to be fixable. Every system on this station was built with the assumption that things will break, and we will have to repair them with whatever we have available." This had never occurred to Kieran before. Syndicate technology was designed to be reliable and standardized, but when it broke, it usually required specialized facilities and exact replacement parts. Human technology seemed to be designed to break in ways that could be fixed by creative people with basic tools. Over the following weeks, Kieran observed more examples of this pattern. When the main communications array developed interference problems, Alex and Roy spent 2 days reconfiguring it using spare parts from a broken coffee maker and some decorative metal panels. When the station's artificial gravity fluctuated, Nina figured out how to stabilize it by adjusting the rotation speed and redistributing mass using furniture and equipment. Each solution was unique and improvised, but they all worked. More importantly, the humans seemed to enjoy solving these problems. They treated each breakdown as an interesting puzzle rather than a crisis. They would gather around broken equipment, discussing possibilities and testing theories, often laughing when their first attempts failed. "Do you not find this stressful?" Kieran asked Nina after she had successfully repaired a malfunctioning air recycling unit, using parts from 3 different broken devices. "Sometimes," she replied, "but it is also kind of fun. There is something satisfying about making something work when it really should not. Besides, what else would we do? Sit around and worry about it?" Kieran began to understand that the humans did not see their technological limitations as weaknesses. They saw them as interesting challenges that required creative solutions. They did not expect their equipment to work perfectly, so they were not disappointed when it broke down. Instead, they expected to have to fix things, so they became very good at fixing things. This realization forced him to reconsider many of his earlier observations. What he had initially seen as primitive and inefficient now looked like adaptive and resilient. The humans built systems that could be maintained and modified by generalists rather than specialists. They trained their people to think creatively rather than follow procedures. They designed for flexibility rather than perfection. His reports to the Syndicate Council began to change tone. Instead of documenting human limitations, he started describing human capabilities. Instead of recommending that they be ignored, he suggested that they might be worth studying more carefully. The response from his superiors was predictably dismissive. "Do not let their crude tricks fool you," Administrator Yoth replied to one of his reports. "Any species can improvise temporary solutions to simple problems. What matters is their ability to build reliable, scalable systems. Their approach might work for a small research station, but it would never work for a real civilization." But Kieran was no longer sure about that. He had seen these humans solve problems that would have stumped Syndicate engineers. He had watched them turn failures into successes and limitations into advantages. They might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they seemed to have something else that might be even more valuable: the ability to adapt and overcome whatever challenges they faced. As his second month on the station neared its end, Kieran found himself hoping that his assignment would be extended. He was learning things about problem-solving and innovation that were not taught in any syndicate academy. The humans had shown him that there might be more than one way to build a successful civilization. The discovery that would change everything began with a routine sensor sweep of the outer system. Dr. Beth had been tracking unusual energy signatures near the edge of Proxima 7's gravitational influence for several days, but the readings were too faint and inconsistent to draw any conclusions. She mentioned the anomaly during the daily briefing, suggesting it might be natural phenomena related to the star's magnetic field fluctuations. Kieran listened to the discussion with growing unease. The energy patterns Beth described sounded familiar, though he could not immediately place where he had encountered similar readings before. Something about the frequency modulations and pulse intervals triggered memories from his training at the Syndicate Academy, but the connection remained elusive. That evening, while reviewing his notes in preparation for his weekly report, Kieran accessed the Syndicate database through his secure communication link. He ran a search for energy signatures matching the patterns Beth had detected, expecting to find references to natural stellar phenomena or perhaps some classified research project. Instead, the search results made his blood run cold. The energy patterns matched those associated with swarm scout vessels. The swarm was a parasitic species that consumed other life forms and assimilated their technology for their own use. They had been responsible for the complete destruction of at least 12 civilizations over the past millennium, leaving behind only empty worlds stripped of all biological matter. The Syndicate had been tracking their movements for centuries, but they had never been detected this far from their last known location. Kieran immediately requested an emergency communication channel with Syndicate Command. While waiting for the connection to be established, he tried to calculate how much time they had before a full swarm assault arrived. If the scouts had already reached the Proxima 7 system, the main force could be anywhere from days to weeks behind them. Administrator Yoth appeared on the communication screen, looking annoyed at being awakened during his sleep cycle. "This had better be important, Vel. You are supposed to file regular reports, not emergency communications." "Administrator, we have a critical situation developing. I have detected energy signatures consistent with swarm scout activity in this system. We need immediate evacuation and military support." Yoth's expression shifted from annoyance to skepticism. "Swarm scouts? Are you certain of this identification? The swarm has never been detected in this sector before." Kieran transmitted the sensor data that Beth had collected, along with his analysis comparing it to known swarm signatures. "The match is 97% consistent with previous encounters. Even if there is a small chance I am wrong, the potential consequences require immediate action." "I will forward your report to the appropriate departments," Yoth replied after reviewing the data. "In the meantime, continue your monitoring assignment. Do not alarm the humans unnecessarily. If this is a false identification, we do not want to damage our relationship with them over a misunderstanding." The communication ended, leaving Kieran frustrated by the bureaucratic response. He knew that Syndicate decision-making processes were thorough but slow, designed to prevent hasty actions that might have unintended consequences. Under normal circumstances, this careful approach was wise, but when facing the swarm, delays could be fatal. Unable to sleep, Kieran spent the rest of the night reviewing everything he knew about swarm tactics and capabilities. They were not simply aggressive predators seeking to expand their territory. They were a collective intelligence that consumed other species to add their biological and technological distinctiveness to their own. They studied their targets carefully before attacking, learning weaknesses and developing countermeasures that made resistance nearly impossible. The next morning brought alarming news. Roy returned from a routine supply run to a nearby Syndicate monitoring station, with reports that the facility had gone completely silent. All communication attempts had failed, and automated systems were broadcasting only static. The station's status beacon indicated that life support was still functioning, but there were no signs of activity from the crew. "Could be equipment failure," Roy suggested during the emergency meeting that Alex had called. "Those monitoring stations are pretty isolated. If their communication array went down, they might not be able to send for help." Dr. Beth pulled up a tactical display showing the locations of various facilities in the region. "The Syndicate station is only 2 light hours away. If there was a major malfunction, They should have been able to launch an emergency beacon or send a distress probe. Nina looked concerned. What if it was not equipment failure? What if something attacked them? Kieran felt his worst fears beginning to crystallize. If the swarm had already reached the Syndicate monitoring station, then the scout reports he had detected were probably advance reconnaissance for a larger force. The humans were in immediate danger, but he could not warn them without revealing classified information about swarm capabilities and tactics. Alex made the decision that Kieran had been hoping for. We should investigate. If the station crew needs help, we have medical supplies and repair equipment they might need. If something dangerous happened to them, we need to know about it before it happens to us. Roy and Alex prepared one of the station's research shuttles for the journey to the Silent Syndicate facility. Kieran volunteered to accompany them, ostensibly to serve as a liaison with any surviving Syndicate personnel. In reality, he hoped to gather intelligence about what they might be facing and find some way to warn the humans without violating his orders. The trip to the monitoring station took 6 hours. As they approached, Roy's instruments detected the facility's automated systems still functioning normally. The station appeared undamaged from the outside, with no signs of weapon impacts or structural failure. But there were no responses to communication attempts and no signs of life aboard the facility. Life support shows normal atmosphere and temperature, Alex reported as they prepared to dock. Whatever happened, it was not a hull breach or environmental failure. They entered the station through the main docking port, following standard safety protocols. The corridors were well lit and properly pressurized, but eerily quiet. Their footsteps echoed through empty passages that should have been filled with the sounds of working personnel and operating equipment. They found the first body in the command center. The Syndicate officer was sitting at his workstation as if he had simply fallen asleep on duty. But when Roy checked for vital signs, they discovered that the body was completely drained of all biological fluids. The skin was dry and papery, stretched over bones and empty tissues like a discarded shell. What could do this? Nina whispered, her medical training struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. Kieran knew exactly what could do this, but he was not supposed to know about the swarm's feeding methods. I have never seen anything like this before, he lied. We should search the rest of the station and then leave immediately. They found 12 more bodies throughout the facility, all showing the same horrifying condition. Every drop of biological fluid had been extracted, leaving behind only empty husks that looked like preserved specimens. Whatever had killed the station crew, it had been thorough and efficient. As they prepared to leave, Alex noticed something moving in one of the storage compartments. The movement was subtle, just a slight shift in the shadows, but enough to catch his attention. He opened the compartment door and found what looked like a small writhing mass of dark tissue about the size of his fist. "Do not touch it," Kieran said quickly, recognizing the creature for what it was. "We need to leave now," but it was too late. The thing in the storage compartment pulsed with bioluminescent signals, and similar pulses answered from throughout the station. The swarm parasites had been waiting for new hosts to arrive, and now they knew that fresh biological material was available for consumption. The parasites moved faster than anything Kieran had seen in the intelligence briefings. Dark shapes scuttled out of vents and storage compartments throughout the abandoned station, flowing like liquid across surfaces and leaping between walls with impossible speed. Their bioluminescent signals pulsed in coordinated patterns, creating a communication network that turned the entire facility into a single hunting organism. "Run!" Kieran shouted, abandoning any pretense of ignorance about what they were facing. "Get back to the shuttle now!" Roy and Alex needed no further encouragement. They had both served in dangerous situations before and recognized the tone of absolute urgency in Kieran's voice. The three of them sprinted through the corridors while Nina sealed the storage compartment and followed close behind, her medical bag bouncing against her side. The first parasite reached them just as they entered the main corridor leading to the docking bay. It launched itself from a ceiling vent directly at Roy's head, moving in a graceful arc that would have intersected perfectly with his path. But Roy had reflexes trained by years of piloting through asteroid fields and debris clouds. He ducked and rolled without breaking stride, leaving the creature to impact harmlessly against the wall behind him. Alex grabbed a maintenance tool from a wall bracket and swung it at 2 more parasites that were converging on their position. The improvised weapon connected with both creatures, sending them flying back down the corridor. The impact should have been fatal, but the parasites simply reformed their shapes and resumed their pursuit. They are tougher than they look, Alex called out as they reached the docking bay. How do we kill them? You do not kill them, Kieran replied while frantically entering the shuttle's startup sequence. You run from them and hope they do not follow you home. The shuttle's engines came online just as a wave of parasites flooded into the docking bay. Roy took the pilot's seat and began emergency undocking procedures, while the others strapped themselves in. Through the viewports, they could see dozens of the creatures covering the station's hull, their bioluminescent signals creating patterns of light that looked almost beautiful until you understood what they meant. The shuttle pulled away from the monitoring station and began its journey back to the research facility. For the first few hours, Kieran hoped that they had escaped clean. The parasites seemed to be limited to short-range movement, and none of them had managed to attach themselves to the shuttle during their hasty departure. But as they approached the halfway point of their return journey, Roy's instruments detected something that made Kieran's worst fears come true. Multiple large contacts were entering the Proxima 7 system at high speed, their energy signatures matching those of swarm assault vessels. We have company, Roy announced, highlighting the contacts on the tactical display. Whatever those things are, they are big and they are coming fast. Kieran studied the sensor readings and counted at least 15 major vessels, each one large enough to carry thousands of parasites and assimilated warriors. The main swarm force had arrived, probably drawn by the signals from the advanced scouts that had consumed the monitoring station. We need to warn the research station, Alex said, reaching for the communication controls. No, Kieran replied quickly. If you send a transmission, the swarm will intercept it and learn about your facility. We need to return quietly and prepare defenses. Defenses against what? Nina asked. You know what these things are, do you not? You have seen them before. Kieran realized that his cover story was no longer viable. The humans needed to understand what they were facing if they had any hope of survival. They are called the swarm. They are a parasitic species that consumes other life forms and assimilates their technology. They have destroyed entire civilizations. The shuttle fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Roy continued piloting toward the research station while the others processed what Kieran had told them. Why did you not warn us about this before? Alex asked finally. Because I was not supposed to know they were here, Kieran admitted. My mission was to observe your species, not to protect you from external threats. The Syndicate has strict protocols about sharing classified information with non-member species. But you are sharing it now. Because the situation has changed. The swarm does not distinguish between Syndicate citizens and humans. If they reach your station, we will all die together. Dr. Beth had been analyzing the sensor data on her portable computer. These assault ships will reach our station in approximately 8 hours. How long before Syndicate reinforcements can arrive? Kieran did some quick calculations based on standard fleet deployment protocols. At least 3 days, probably longer. The nearest battle group is stationed 2 sectors away. So we are on our own, Roy said grimly. Not exactly, Kieran replied. I sent a report to Syndicate Command when I first detected the scout signatures. They should be dispatching military support. As if summoned by his words, the shuttle's communication system activated with an incoming transmission. The signal bore Syndicate military encryption codes indicating that the promised reinforcements were already en route. Kieran accepted the transmission and found himself looking at the stern face of Commander Orion, a high-ranking officer known for his aggressive tactics and absolute confidence in Syndicate technological superiority. Observer Vel. This is Commander Orion aboard the battlecruiser Dominion. We have received your report about possible swarm activity in this system. What is your current status? Commander, the swarm has already consumed a Syndicate monitoring station and a full assault force is approaching the research facility where I am stationed. We need immediate evacuation support. Orion's expression showed skeptical amusement. Observer, our intelligence indicates that the swarm has not been active in this sector for over 2 centuries. Are you certain you have not misidentified some local phenomenon? These primitive humans might have crude weapons that could produce similar energy signatures. Kieran felt frustration rising in his chest. Even faced with direct evidence, Syndicate Command was reluctant to believe that the situation was as serious as he reported. Commander, I have personally observed swarm parasites at the monitoring station. The crew has been completely consumed. This is not a misidentification. Very well, Orion replied dismissively. We will investigate your claims. In the meantime, maintain your position at the research station. If there is a genuine threat, the Dominion is more than capable of handling it. The transmission ended, leaving the shuttle crew with the knowledge that help was coming but might arrive too late. Commander Orion's battlecruiser was powerful by Syndicate standards, but Kieran had studied reports from previous swarm encounters. Individual ships, no matter how advanced, rarely survived contact with a full assault force. They reached the research station with 4 hours to spare before the swarm arrival. As soon as they docked, Kieran called an emergency meeting to brief the entire crew on what they were facing. He expected panic and despair when he described the swarm's capabilities and the fate of the monitoring station crew. Instead, the humans responded with determined focus. Alex immediately began planning defensive modifications to the station's systems. Nina started preparing medical countermeasures in case anyone was exposed to the parasites. Dr. Beth began analyzing the sensor data to understand how the swarm ships operated. Roy started calculating escape routes and emergency evacuation procedures. "We have faced dangerous situations before," Alex said after Kieran finished his briefing. "Maybe not this dangerous, but the principle is the same. We identify the problem, we adapt our resources to address it, and we find a way to survive." Kieran watched the humans prepare for battle against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations with technology far more advanced than theirs. He expected them to be terrified, but instead they seemed energized by the challenge. They were treating the approaching swarm assault like another engineering problem that needed a creative solution. 2 hours before the swarm assault fleet was scheduled to arrive, Commander Orion's battlecruiser Dominion dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima 7 system. Kieran watched the massive vessel's approach on the research station's sensors, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. The Syndicate's most advanced warship had arrived to face the threat, but he had studied enough reports to know that individual ships rarely survived encounters with full swarm forces. The Dominion was impressive by any standard. Nearly 2 kilometers long and bristling with plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and defensive field generators, it represented the pinnacle of Syndicate military engineering. Its bio-neural command systems could process tactical information and coordinate responses faster than any purely mechanical computer. Commander Orion had good reason to be confident in his ship's capabilities, but Kieran had also read the classified reports from previous swarm encounters. The parasitic species specialized in turning advanced technology against its creators. Their ability to infiltrate bio-neural networks and assimilate complex systems meant that sophisticated weapons often became liabilities rather than assets. "Impressive ship," Alex commented, studying the Dominion specifications on the tactical display. "Those plasma cannons should be effective against organic targets." "The swarm is not like other organic targets," Kieran replied. "They adapt to whatever weapons are used against them. The more advanced the technology, the faster they learn to counter it." Nina looked up from her medical preparations. "What about simpler weapons? Things that work on basic physical principles rather than advanced technology?" "Those might be more effective," Kieran admitted. "But the Syndicate abandoned primitive weapons centuries ago. Everything on that battlecruiser depends on bio-neural control systems and quantum field manipulation." Dr. Beth had been analyzing the approaching swarm signatures with her portable computer. "Kieran, look at this. The energy patterns from their ships show interference in specific frequency ranges. It looks like they might have trouble with certain types of electromagnetic fields." "That makes sense," Alex said, studying the data. "If they depend on biological systems for coordination, strong electromagnetic pulses could disrupt their communications." Roy was checking the research station's power systems and defensive capabilities. "We have the industrial fabricators and the mining laser array. If we reroute power from life support and research systems, we might be able to create some kind of electromagnetic weapon." Kieran stared at the humans as they calmly discussed building improvised weapons to fight an enemy that had destroyed entire star systems. They were not following any established military doctrine or relying on proven technologies. Instead, they were applying basic scientific principles and creative engineering to develop solutions that had never been tested. "You cannot seriously be considering fighting the swarm with improvised equipment," he said. "This is not a broken water recycling system. These are professional military forces with thousands of years of combat experience." "Maybe," Alex replied, already sketching modifications to the mining laser system. "But they have probably never fought anyone quite like us before. Every species they have encountered probably relied on the same kinds of advanced technology that the Syndicate uses. Maybe our primitive approach will surprise them. Before Kieran could respond, the research station's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from Commander Orion. The Syndicate officer appeared on the main screen, his expression showing supreme confidence mixed with barely concealed contempt for their primitive surroundings. Observer Vel, I trust you and the humans are prepared to evacuate. My tactical analysis indicates that the approaching vessels are indeed of swarm origin, but they pose no significant threat to a ship of the Dominion's capabilities. Commander, I recommend extreme caution. The swarm specializes in assimilating advanced technology. Their tactics are specifically designed to counter ships like yours. Orion's laugh was dismissive. Observer, you have been spending too much time with these primitives. Their paranoid thinking is affecting your judgment. The Dominion has shields that can withstand stellar radiation and weapons that can crack planetary crusts. No collection of parasites and stolen technology can pose a serious threat to Syndicate military engineering. The transmission ended as the swarm assault fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and began approaching the inner system. 15 massive vessels, each one a twisted fusion of organic growth and assimilated technology from dozens of different species. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent signals that coordinated their movements like a single vast organism. Commander Orion moved the Dominion into an attack position, powering up his weapons and raising defensive shields. Kieran watched the tactical display with growing dread as the Syndicate battlecruiser prepared to engage, an enemy that had been specifically designed to counter exactly this type of conventional military response. The battle began with a devastating exchange of fire. The Dominion's plasma cannon struck several swarm vessels, carving deep wounds in their organic hulls. But instead of being destroyed, the damaged ships began to adapt. Their hull material shifted and changed, developing new configurations that absorbed and redirected the plasma energy. Within minutes, the same weapons that had been effective were no longer causing significant damage. The swarm response was swift and terrifying. Streams of parasitic organisms launched from their ships, flowing through space like living rivers toward the Dominion. The battlecruiser's point defense systems destroyed thousands of them, but more kept coming. When they reached the ship's hull, they began infiltrating through sensor ports and communication arrays. The parasites are inside the ship's bio-neural networks, Dr. Beth observed, tracking the energy signatures on her instruments. They are taking control of the Dominion systems from within. Within 30 minutes of the battle's start, Commander Orion's supremely confident voice returned to the communication system. But something was wrong. His words came in the same tone and cadence, but the content was completely different. Observer Vel, resistance is futile. The Dominion's crew has been assimilated into the Swarm Collective. We now possess all Syndicate military knowledge and technological capabilities. Surrender your station and you will be added to our strength. Resist and you will be consumed. The transmission ended, leaving the research station crew staring at the tactical display in horror. The Dominion was now showing swarm energy signatures. Its weapons and shields turned against any potential rescue forces. The most advanced ship in the Syndicate fleet had become another tool of their enemy. How long before they reach us? Roy asked grimly. About 2 hours, Dr. Beth replied, tracking the approaching fleet. Maybe less if they decide to accelerate. Alex had spent the last hour modifying the station's mining laser array, rerouting power from non-essential systems, and reconfiguring the targeting controls. Our electromagnetic pulse weapon is ready for testing, but we have no idea if it will actually work against swarm technology. Nina had been preparing medical countermeasures based on her analysis of the parasites they had encountered at the monitoring station. I think I understand how their nervous systems function. If we can create the right kind of interference, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. Kieran watched the humans continue their preparations with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. They had just witnessed the most powerful ship in known space fall to their enemy in less than an hour. But they were still planning to fight back with improvised weapons and untested theories. You realize this is impossible, he said. The swarm has assimilated the knowledge and technology of hundreds of species. They have capabilities that we cannot even comprehend. Maybe, Alex replied, making final adjustments to the mining laser controls. But they have one weakness that might matter. They rely on assimilating other people's technology, instead of developing their own innovations. Everything they use was originally designed by someone else. I do not understand the significance of that, Nina explained while loading her medical scanner with new software she had developed. It means they are really good at using existing technology, but they might not be as good at adapting to completely new approaches. Every species they have fought probably used some variation of the same basic principles: bioneural networks, quantum field manipulation, energy weapons, but we are approaching this problem differently. Roy was loading the shuttle with emergency supplies and preparing evacuation routes. Our technology is not advanced enough for them to want to assimilate. Our weapons are too simple for them to adapt to quickly, and our methods are too chaotic for them to predict. The first test came when a swarm scout ship approached the research station to assess its defenses. Alex waited until the vessel was within optimal range, then activated the modified mining laser array. Instead of a focused beam designed to cut through asteroid rock, the system now produced a broad-spectrum electromagnetic pulse that flooded the target with interference across multiple frequency ranges. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The scout ship's bioluminescent signals flickered and went dark. Its smooth flight path became erratic as internal systems failed. The vessel tumbled through space for several minutes before its crew managed to restore basic functionality and retreat to rejoin the main fleet. It worked, Dr. Beth said in amazement. The electromagnetic pulse disrupted their bioneural coordination systems. For about 10 minutes, Alex noted. They will adapt to that frequency range and develop countermeasures. But it proves that our approach can be effective. Over the next hour, the research station crew refined their defensive systems and prepared for the main assault. They converted industrial equipment into weapons, modified scientific instruments into sensors, and developed tactics that would have horrified any proper military strategist. Nothing they did followed established procedures or proven methods. Everything was improvised, experimental, and untested. When the swarm fleet finally reached the research station, they faced defenses unlike anything they had encountered before. Electromagnetic pulses disrupted their coordination. Kinetic projectiles fired from improvised railguns bypassed their energy shields. Chemical explosives created interference patterns that confused their sensors. Each human innovation forced the swarm to adapt to something completely outside their experience. The battle was chaotic and desperate, but gradually the humans began to gain ground. Their willingness to improvise and adapt faster than their enemy could counter-adapt gave them an unexpected advantage. Kieran found himself fighting alongside them, no longer an observer, but an active participant in their struggle for survival. The final phase of the battle came when the humans realized that defense alone would not be enough. The swarm was adapting to their improvised weapons faster than they could develop new countermeasures. Their electromagnetic pulses were becoming less effective as the enemy ships modified their bioneural networks to resist interference. Their kinetic weapons were running out of ammunition. Their chemical explosives were depleting the station's limited supply of reactive materials. "We need to take the fight to them," Alex declared during a brief lull in the assault. "If we stay here and keep reacting to their attacks, they will eventually overcome all our defenses." Roy studied the tactical display showing the swarm fleet positions. The converted Dominion is hanging back from the main assault, probably coordinating the attack. If we could disable it, the other ships might lose their tactical coordination. "How do we get close enough to a battlecruiser to cause meaningful damage?" Nina asked. "Our shuttle would be destroyed before we got within weapons range." Dr. Beth had been analyzing the swarm's communication patterns and fleet organization. "I think I understand how their command structure works. The parasites in the Dominion are controlling the entire fleet through quantum entanglement signals. If we could disrupt that connection, each ship would have to operate independently." Kieran studied the plan they were developing and felt his training in proper military procedure rebelling against everything they proposed. "You are talking about a suicide mission. Even if you somehow managed to reach the Dominion, you would be facing an entire crew of assimilated syndicate officers with access to the ship's full combat capabilities." "Not necessarily," Alex replied, reviewing schematics of syndicate battlecruiser designs. "The swarm parasites are controlling the ship's systems, but they are still using the original bioneural networks. If we could introduce the right kind of interference directly into those networks, we might be able to cause a cascade failure. That would require physical access to the ship's central processing core," Kieran pointed out. The core is located in the most heavily defended section of the vessel. Then we will have to find a way to get there, Roy said simply. What other choice do we have? The plan they developed was audacious even by human standards. Roy would pilot their research shuttle on a high-speed approach to the Dominion, using the chaos of the ongoing battle as cover. Alex and Kieran would board the battle cruiser through a maintenance airlock while Nina remained with the shuttle to provide medical support and coordinate their escape. Dr. Beth would stay at the research station to monitor the fleet's communication patterns and guide the boarding team to their target. This is insane, Kieran said as they prepared for the mission. You are planning to infiltrate the most advanced warship in the galaxy, using a civilian research shuttle and improvised equipment. Exactly, Alex replied, loading his gear with homemade electromagnetic pulse devices and chemical disruptors. They will never expect anyone to try something this crazy. That gives us an advantage. The approach to the Dominion was a terrifying experience that tested Roy's piloting skills to their absolute limits. The converted battlecruiser was surrounded by swarm escort vessels and defensive systems that could have destroyed their shuttle with a single weapon burst. But Roy flew like someone who had spent years navigating through asteroid fields and debris clouds, using microgravity maneuvers and sensor shadows to avoid detection. They reached the Dominion's hull without being spotted. But boarding the ship proved to be its own challenge. The maintenance airlock was designed for syndicate personnel, not for emergency infiltration by hostile forces. Alex had to jury-rig an interface between their shuttle's systems and the battlecruiser's access controls, bypassing security protocols that had been designed by some of the best engineers in the galaxy. Once inside the ship, Kieran led Alex through corridors that had become alien territory. The Dominion's crew had been completely assimilated by swarm parasites, leaving behind empty shells that moved with mechanical precision. The bio-neural networks throughout the ship pulsed with organic growths that had integrated themselves into every system and control interface. The central processing core is 3 levels down, Kieran whispered as they avoided a patrol of assimilated officers. We need to reach the main computer chamber without triggering any security alerts. They moved through the ship like ghosts, using maintenance shafts and service corridors to avoid the main passages. Alex's improvised scanning equipment helped them detect the organic growths that had been integrated into the ship's systems. Every surface seemed to be covered with pulsing neural tissue that could potentially detect their presence. The central processing core was a vast chamber filled with bio-neural processing units that looked like giant mechanical brains suspended in nutrient fluid. Swarm parasites had infiltrated every component, creating a hybrid system that combined syndicate technology with organic computing power. The sight was both fascinating and horrifying. How do we disrupt something like this? Alex asked, studying the alien modifications to familiar syndicate equipment. Kieran examined the neural pathways that connected the various processing units. The parasites have integrated themselves into the ship's command structure, but they are still using the original information flow patterns. If we could overload specific neural pathways, we might be able to cause a system-wide failure. Alex unpacked his electromagnetic pulse devices and began connecting them to key junction points in the bio-neural network. This should create feedback loops that the parasites cannot compensate for. Their organic components are not designed to handle this kind of electrical interference. The sabotage took only minutes to complete, but those minutes felt like hours as they worked under the constant threat of discovery. When Alex finally activated the pulse devices, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Lights flickered throughout the chamber as the bio-neural networks began experiencing cascade failures. The organic growth started convulsing as electrical interference overwhelmed their nervous systems. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as the swarm parasites realized they were losing control of their most valuable asset. Kieran and Alex ran for the extraction point, while emergency systems tried to compensate for the massive system failures they had caused. Behind them, the central processing core erupted in sparks and organic fluid as centuries of advanced technology tore itself apart. They reached their shuttle just as the Dominion began losing power throughout its major systems. Roy had kept the engines running and the docking clamps ready for immediate departure. As they pulled away from the crippled battlecruiser, they could see the other swarm vessels beginning to scatter as their coordination network collapsed. It worked, Dr. Beth reported from the research station. The fleet is breaking up. Without central coordination, They are reverting to individual ship operations. The remaining swarm vessels were still dangerous, but they were no longer operating as a unified force. Some continued attacking the research station, but others began retreating toward the outer system. A few seemed to be having internal conflicts as different parasite groups competed for control of their ship systems. Over the next several hours, the scattered swarm forces were gradually driven off or destroyed by a combination of human ingenuity and the arrival of additional syndicate reinforcements. The research station's improvised defenses proved effective against individual attackers, and the humans' willingness to adapt their tactics kept the enemy from developing effective countermeasures. When the battle finally ended, Kieran found himself surrounded by exhausted but victorious humans who had accomplished something that should have been impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations, using nothing but creativity, determination, and a willingness to try approaches that no rational military strategist would have considered. His final report to the Syndicate Council was unlike anything he had ever written before. Instead of documenting human limitations and recommending continued observation, he described their capabilities and strongly urged immediate alliance. He explained how their unconventional approaches to problem-solving had succeeded, where advanced technology had failed. He recommended that humans be granted full membership in the Galactic Syndicate, and that their methods be studied and incorporated into Syndicate military doctrine. The response from his superiors was initially skeptical, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans had survived a swarm assault that had destroyed a Syndicate battlecruiser. They had developed effective countermeasures using primitive technology and improvised tactics. They had accomplished what centuries of Syndicate military planning had been unable to achieve. Kieran's assignment was officially extended indefinitely. His new role was not to monitor humans, but to serve as a permanent liaison between humanity and the Syndicate Council. He would help coordinate the integration of human innovation with Syndicate resources, creating a partnership that benefited both species. As he watched Alex and his team begin planning their next research project, Kieran reflected on how much his understanding had changed over the past few months. The humans had taught him that there was more than one way to approach any problem. They had shown him that limitations could be advantages if you knew how to use them creatively. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that survival often depended not on having the best technology, but on having the best people to use whatever technology was available. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they were no longer underestimated.